Yesterday, President Trump addressed last week's stock market turmoil caused by confusion around his tariff agenda. Japan's shocking move, economic retaliation that worries the U.S., has left financial markets in turmoil. Japan has just taken a step that could shake the U.S. economy. They're quietly selling off large amounts of US Treasury bonds, an unprecedented move. What does this mean? Is Japan trying to put pressure on the US, and how big will the impact be? Japan cuts US bonds. A warning for Washington. For decades, Japan has been one of the largest creditors of the US, holding hundreds of billions of dollars in Treasury bonds. This has helped finance US debt and stabilize the dollar. But recently, Tokyo has significantly reduced its holdings of US bonds. According to the latest financial reports, Japan has sold tens of billions of dollars in US treasuries over the past few months. This is a concerning move. Why is Japan doing this? The answer may lie in the growing trade tensions between the two countries, particularly over US tariffs on Japanese electric vehicles. The U.S. government has imposed high tariffs on imported EVs, including those from major Japanese automakers like Toyota, Honda, and Nissan. Tokyo is not happy, and now Japan seems to be using its financial weapon to retaliate against the U.S. If Japan continues to sell off U.S. bonds, what will happen to the dollar and the global economy? The U.S. protects its EV industry. Japan strikes back. To understand this, we need to look at the U.S. strategy. The U.S. is pushing to develop its domestic EV industry, aiming to compete with China and Europe. American automakers like Tesla, General Motors, and Ford are receiving massive government support while imported EVs are hit with high tariffs. But why is Japan affected so much? Because Japanese automakers lead the world in hybrid and EV technology. For example, Toyota pioneered hybrid cars with the Prius. Nissan was one of the first to mass-produce EVs with the Nissan Leaf. Honda is rapidly expanding its EV lineup. Japan believes it has superior technology, yet the U.S. is blocking its products with tariffs. That's why Tokyo is retaliating financially. Cutting U.S. Treasury bond holdings sends a clear message. If the U.S. continues protectionism, Japan will stop supporting the U.S. economy by buying its debt. Now, how long can Washington endure this pressure? Is Japan trying to reduce its dependence on the dollar? Another major reason for Japan's bond sell-off is its desire to reduce dependence on the U.S. dollar. The global financial system is shifting. China is reducing its dollar reserves and promoting the yuan. Russia has cut U.S. bond holdings following economic sanctions, and other Asian nations like South Korea and India are diversifying their foreign assets. Now Japan may be following this trend. Tokyo could redirect its capital into Asian markets, strengthening cooperation with China, South Korea, and ASEAN to build a more independent regional financial system. This could accelerate the decline of U.S. dollar dominance. So could Japan's move be the first step in a major shift in the global economy? If Japan continues selling bonds, how will the U.S. respond? Can the U.S. ignore Japan's warning? If Japan continues to sell U.S. bonds, the dollar could be seriously impacted. A worst-case scenario could unfold. The dollar's value declines, increasing import costs and causing inflation in the U.S., higher U.S. bond interest rates raise borrowing costs for the U.S. government, and global financial market instability creates a domino effect on the world economy. The U.S. has two choices: compromise with Japan by reducing EV tariffs to maintain financial stability, or continue the confrontation, accepting financial and trade risks. Both options carry major risks. The biggest question now is, what will the U.S. do next? We are at a critical moment in economic history, and this may be just the beginning. Stay tuned for the next developments. A tariff decision could change the future of the U.S.-Canada strategic relationship. Canada is entering a decisive phase, and what will be the direction of its defense and economic strategies? Tense trade relations, U.S. and Canada entering a testing phase. The 25% tariffs on steel and 10% tariffs on aluminum imposed by the U.S. in 2018 caused significant damage to Canada's industries, with the country's economy losing about $2.5 billion annually. However, rather than accepting defeat, Canada took strong retaliatory measures to deal with Australia, a significant move. At the end of 2023, Canada signed a contract worth up to 6 billion Canadian dollars to purchase long-range radar systems from Australia, known as the JRO radar. This system will help Canada enhance its surveillance capabilities in the Arctic, an area of increasing strategic importance due to factors such as climate change and rising military activity from Russia. Why Australia? The JRO radar system can detect airborne targets at distances of up to 3,000 kilometers, allowing Canada to protect vast and inaccessible regions without relying on U.S. systems, thus reducing dependence on the U.S. in the long term. As the relationship between the two countries became increasingly strained, Canada realized it could no longer rely on the U.S., especially given the unpredictability of U.S. policies aimed at protecting its national interests. To mitigate risks, Canada began seeking more reliable international partners to protect its interests. Since 2023, Canada has signed defense and trade agreements with the European Union and the Southeast Asia region, risk of military conflict with other nations, particularly Russia. The Canadian government is focusing on enhancing defense capabilities in this region to protect national sovereignty. As global interest in the Arctic's energy resources intensifies, the competition for access to these resources is likely to grow. Canada's strategic posture will play a key role in ensuring stability and deterring adversaries in the region. With rising global tensions and new technologies emerging, the Arctic may soon become a critical front in the future of international security. Future forecast. Increasing surveillance capabilities in the Arctic will be one of Canada's key priorities in the coming years, especially as climate change makes the region a hotspot for resource competition and geopolitical influence. As new shipping routes open up and access to untapped resources grows, Canada will need to ensure it can protect its interests in the face of rising global pressures. Strengthening international partnerships and enhancing defense infrastructure will be critical in maintaining stability and securing Canada's strategic position in the Arctic. Important strategic shifts for Canada. Decisive move. The defense contract with Australia is not just an important step in reducing dependence on the U.S., but also a clear message that Canada is willing to seek new partners to protect its national interests. This move could reshape Canada's foreign and defense strategy for many years to come. This strategic pivot reflects a significant change in how Canada views global partners, moving away from reliance on the U.S. in defense and economic matters. These changes may shape the future of the entire region. Don't miss the next analysis in the video. The stock market. The U.S. stock market has lost $5 trillion in 3 weeks. Yes, Trump. He's the ompic of the economy. Wow. $5 trillion today. Greenland offered to buy us. The U.S. stock market has lost $5 trillion in just 3 weeks. Prices are soaring, wages stagnant, the economy is a complete roller coaster. Yet some still claim it was the greatest economic era in history. Tonight, Bill Maher breaks it all down. The policies, the promises, and the reality of what really happened under Trump's leadership and who actually benefited. Bill Maher doesn't hold back. He calls Trump a master of creating illusions, treating the U.S. economy the same way he treated his businesses. And, let's be honest, that's not a good thing. Trump Airlines failed, Trump Steaks a joke, Trump University shut down for fraud, Trump casinos went bankrupt 6 times. A casino losing money is like failing a breathalyzer at an oxygen bar. And yet, Trump's approach to the U.S. economy wasn't any different. National debt exploded, adding $7.8 trillion in just 4 years. Market volatility surged, and workers saw no real income growth. Yet Trump kept calling it the greatest economy ever, while everyday Americans struggled. What is he trying to tell us by continuing to do this? Applause, dance, and now making YMCA his anthem. Trump promised his 2017 tax cuts would help the middle class, but in reality, they helped the ultra-rich. 83% of the tax cuts went to the top 1%. Corporate tax rates slashed from 35% to 21%. Companies used tax savings for stock buybacks, not for higher wages. Jeff Bezos got richer, corporate executives got richer, and everyday Americans were stuck in the same place, except with higher living costs. And here's the kicker. By 2027, middle-class Americans will be paying more in taxes. That's right, more. And Americans are like, but we need eggs. What else are we going to throw at the Teslas? But you know what? $5 trillion in 3 weeks, and we have only ourselves to blame. Trump said this would happen if we re-elected Biden. Oh, wait. That didn't happen. No, this is happening because Trump wants to bring back manufacturing, and to get the ball rolling, he is manufacturing a recession. Trump promised his tariff war would protect American jobs, but what actually happened was a self-inflicted economic wound. Manufacturing jobs down, farmers lost billions as exports to China collapsed, and businesses faced higher costs, forcing them to raise prices. Who paid the price? Bill Maher summed it up perfectly. Trump's trade war was like setting your own house on fire and calling it a heating strategy. Trump says, I like reading as little as possible. I don't need, 200-page reports on something that can be handled on a page. He's actually proud that he makes decisions without learning anything, which makes him the perfect president for a nation perpetually looking at its phone. Trump said he'd create the strongest economy in history. Let's look at the actual numbers. GDP growth was just 2.3%, lower than Obama's 2.9%. Stock market losses exceeded $5 trillion in just 3 weeks. But what happened next? Just hours after the ruling, at least 3 planes still took off. According to an Axios report, 2 planes landed in El Salvador while the third was mid-flight when the ruling was issued. Defying a federal court order is unprecedented, raising a fundamental question. Can an entire government override the judiciary without consequences? Trump's fiery response called for the judge's removal instead of compliance. He escalated tensions by publicly attacking the federal judge and calling for his impeachment. But is this even possible under the U.S. Constitution? A judge can only be impeached for misconduct or abuse of power. There has never been a precedent where a judge was removed simply for issuing a ruling unfavorable to the president. This raises a crucial question. Is this a dangerous precedent that threatens the balance of power in American democracy? Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts speaks out with a strong warning. Under mounting pressure from the White House, Chief Justice John Roberts broke his silence in a rare and firm statement, declaring, "Impeachment cannot be used as a weapon against judicial rulings that the administration disagrees with." This statement is historic. In over 200 years, the Supreme Court has rarely intervened so directly in political disputes. It is not just a reminder, it's a clear warning to the Trump administration. If Trump succeeds, what comes next? Will the judiciary remain independent, or will it become a political tool? Broader implications. How does this affect Trump's campaign? This isn't just a legal fight. It could impact Trump's re-election bid. 56% of American voters believe the judicial system should remain independent, and Republican lawmakers are showing signs of division over Trump's actions. International media warn that this could undermine American democracy for decades. The next developments will determine the future of American politics. Will the Supreme Court intervene once again? Can Trump rewrite the rules of the game? The legal war has just begun. Stay tuned. What happens next could change everything. Welcome back. President Trump is now threatening to put a 200% tariff on wine, cognac, and other European alcohol imports. Could those beloved bottles of wine and champagne from the EU become pawns in the biggest trade war happening right now between the US and the EU? Here is what he just posted. The European Union has just put a nasty 50% tariff on whiskey. If this tariff is not removed immediately, the US will shortly place a 200% tariff on all wines, champagnes, and alcoholic products. President Donald Trump has issued a bold threat. If the EU does not change its tariff policies on US steel and aluminum, the US will impose tariffs as high as 200% on wine, champagne, and other alcoholic beverages from EU countries. This is not a hasty decision, but a strategy aimed at pressuring the EU to change what the US claims are unfair tax policies. In reality, this is a hard blow to the EU's wine industry. In 2023, the EU exported about $13.1 billion USD worth of alcoholic beverages to the US, with French wine being the flagship product in that trade. A 200% tariff could cause the price of French and Italian wines to soar, leading to a decline in market share for EU wines in the US. This could severely impact major wine producers in Europe, as American consumers will face double the price for their favorite wines. The wine industry is unlikely to sit idly by. This tariff increase will certainly hit the wine industries in countries like France, Italy, and Spain hard. But this is not just a loss for Europe. If tariffs on EU wine rise, U.S. consumers may turn to other options, including domestic wines, thereby shrinking the market share of EU wine producers in the U.S. One day to the other, we will have to stop sending our wines to the United States. There is no way we can sell wines in the United States if we are suffering a 200% tariff. After Trump's threat to impose 200% tariffs, the European Union responded firmly. Senior officials from the EU declared that Europe would not give up its wine industry and would protect these products against any threats from the US. The EU asserted that it would not concede in this confrontation and was ready to defend its national interests. The European Union strongly criticized President Trump's trade policies, arguing that the 200% tariff on wine and champagne would not only hurt the industry but also damage the trade relationship between the US and the EU. French wine producers, especially premium brands like Champagne, will face great difficulties as high tariffs push up the cost of their products. France has spoken out to protect the interests of its wine industry and is ready to face any retaliatory measures from the US. However, this confrontation creates opportunities for U.S. wine producers. If the EU does indeed impose 200% tariffs on imported wine, U.S. winemakers could expand into the EU market, especially if the U.S. reduces tariffs on domestic wine. This could be a huge boost for the U.S. wine industry, allowing them to build and expand their market in countries that are already familiar with European wine brands. If the EU continues to maintain its tariff rates and refuses to yield, the wine industry in these countries will certainly face a significant decline in revenue in the U.S. At the same time, U.S. wine producers will have the opportunity to expand their market share in EU countries if they reduce tariffs on domestic wine products, especially California or Texas wine brands. The trade war between the U.S. and the EU is entering a phase of unprecedented tension. How will the EU respond, and can the U.S. seize this opportunity to expand its wine market in Europe? Don't look away. The next developments in this tariff war will surprise you.